Okay, everyone, thank you for joining us. We're about 2 minutes out. We're going to let a couple more people join us, so we're going to start at 2 p.m. on the dot. Thanks for being here. As you guys join, if you can answer the quick poll so we can collect some information on who's here today. And here's our second poll. If you guys can answer it as well. It looks like we have a lot of people in the scaling up stage, which is great, and some just starting out. Okay, we've hit 2 p.m. on the dot, so we're going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I see a lot of familiar names here. Welcome to the 5th year of the ICB Spring Webinar Series. As always, we're excited to have you here today. So I'm Carlos Rivers. I'm the Executive Director for the Institute for Competency-Based Education out of A&M Commerce. I am joined by Courtney CC Clanton, who's our coordinator. She's going to make sure that this session runs smoothly today. And so today I'm excited because we have our colleague and CBE expert, Dr. Laurie Dodge, who's the Vice Chancellor of Institutional Assessment and Planning and Vice Provost out of Brandman University. So she's going to be sharing with us good things to know about CBE and particularly around regional accreditation. So this is actually our 3rd largest attended webinar. So Laurie, welcome. I've been fortunate enough to have been in many of Laurie's presentations, so I know we're in for a treat. And so thank you, Laurie, for your willingness to host this webinar and share your knowledge with the field. Some housekeeping for everyone. If you do have questions along the way, don't hesitate to answer them, ask them in the questions box. I will be reviewing along the way, so we'll be able to ask Laurie questions during the presentation and after the presentation as well. So without further ado, Laurie, I'm going to pass on the ball to you so you can introduce yourself and take it from here. Laurie, welcome.
Okay. Well, thank you, Carlos, and thank you for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here. And to the audience, I get to talk about my 2 most favorite topics, competency-based education, of course, #1, and accreditation, #2, even though that might surprise you, but I enjoy both of those areas immensely. So as Carlos said, I am the Vice Chancellor of Institutional Assessment and Planning at Brandman University. And I also serve as our accreditation officer for WASC Senior. We're in home base in California. So I welcome all of you. And I also have the distinct pleasure of being the founding chair of the board of directors of CBEN. So I have a lot of CBE friends, and which has really helped, you know, for networking and communication. So I wanted to start, and you'll see that the cover slide here. I always give a little bit of context about the history of competency and competency-based education. And I usually start in the 1970s. With those institutions that were really the pioneers in looking at competency-based education. And of course, in the last 10 years, it's really pushed forward across institutions and different models. But out of curiosity, I thought, where does the word competency come from? And wouldn't you know, 1590s, the origin of the word, it means sufficiency to satisfy the wants of life, from Latin, and also meeting together, agreement, and symmetry. Then in 1797, so future forward, it was defined as sufficiency of qualification, which I think is more what we're talking about when we talk about competency-based education. But I like to think that it's sufficiency to satisfy the wants of life as part of our mission. So Brandman University, some of you may be familiar, but just to help set the context so you can think about where your institution is, we are a private, nonprofit institution that serves working adults. We have 3 main delivery models, a blended, this is pre-COVID, a blended, which students were face-to-face for half of their class and then online for the other half. We have fully online programs. And then what we'll be talking more about today is Brandman MyPath, which is our competency-based education programs. Our credit hour programs run from associate degrees to doctoral degrees. We actually do have about 27 locations in the state of California and Washington, and are also on military bases. And today we're going to just, as an example, and I'll bring forth some of this information, we have 4 direct assessment CBE programs. And again, if you have questions, please don't be shy. Go ahead and put them in the chat. So Brandman's direct assessment CBE programs, we have an Associate of Arts in General Business, which has 20 competencies. We have a Bachelor of Business and Administration that has 56 to 59 competencies, which includes your general education, your core courses, and then various emphasis areas. There's 5 different emphasis areas. We also have a Bachelor of Science in Information Technology program, which 39 competencies, again, includes Gen Ed, the IT core, and an emphasis area. And we have a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership, which is 12 competencies. All of this information publicly available in our catalog. You're welcome to look through that if you have an interest, especially folks are usually pretty interested in Gen Ed and how you do that in competency-based, but that's our programs. So what we're going to walk through today is the Department of Ed, new distance education and innovation regulations, because that's kind of like the big piece of which other pieces fall in. And so second is regional accreditation process and expectations. Third, some design considerations when you're thinking about regional and national regulations. And then of course, best practices. So we're gonna walk through all of this today. So the Department of Education, Distance Education and Innovation Regulations, probably most of you are familiar with the big changes that were made, and that will be effective July 1, 2021. There's many pieces in these changes that affect competency-based education, especially those that are doing that via distance education. So this final rulemaking allows for more flexibility while still holding what we call the quality flag or guardrails to ensure quality in CBE programs. I know July 1st is right around the corner, but you can have early implementation of these provisions we're going to walk through with permission. So if your program was starting before that and you wanted to have a piece, you can work with your regional accreditor in the Department of Ed. The next few slides are part of a presentation that Dave Musser, the Director of Policy Innovation Dissemination Group, Federal State Aid. He presented this at CBE Exchange. He's a great friend and hugely knowledgeable in regards to federal aid and competency-based education. So the Department of Education, the Code of Federal Regulations, or what we call this, the 34 CFR 668.10, says that instruction in, I'm just going to move this one little box here, sorry, oops. I shouldn't have done that. Is my screen still showing?
Yes, we can still see your
presentation. I can't. So sorry, I shouldn't have clicked something. How do I get out of this? Now I just see a big picture of myself.
How about you stop showing your camera and maybe the presentation pops back up again?
Okay, thank you.
Did that work?
Brilliant.
There
Okay.
we go.
Thank you. The federal regulations talk about instructional program that in lieu of credit hours or clock hours, it's a measure of student learning using direct assessment of student learning or recognize the direct assessment of student learning by others. So this is another way that federal government is allowing institutions to build educational programs, not around the credit hour, but around what we call competencies. These are normally self-paced, and it's based on evidence of mastery of each competency, or what we commonly call knowledge, skills, and abilities. And sorry, no. Got it. So key aspects in this new distance education innovation regulations. The definition now, as of July 1st, refers to instructor or instructors instead of instructor. And you may think that's just a really small change, but it actually allows some of the models in CBE where folks are doing team teaching or have more than one instructor. So one instructor may be responsible for some responsibilities, some of the teaching and learning, some may be doing the grading. So in this way, it does allow institutions to develop different models. It also eliminates reference to various types of media. The old regulations had things like DVDs, CDs, and we know as soon as you put it in print, that technology's gone, right? So it uses the phrase other media to allow future forward things that we've not yet discovered in regards to media. It defines an instructor as an individual responsible for delivering course content who meets the qualifications that were established by your accrediting agency. Now, this is key when you're building your model, because you need, please check with your regional accreditor. They vary on what they're looking for as far as faculty qualifications. So instead of the Department of Ed looking at that, they're really dependent on the regional accreditor to define qualified faculty. In addition, those who've been around CBE for a while know that substantive interaction is a big thing that folks are looking at. So substantive interaction is the engaging students in that teaching, learning, and assessment that is consistent with the content, the academic content. So it's not one of those, how are you doing, how are things going kind of thing, that doesn't count. It really has to be around the content and that competency. What the department is now allowing, again, is more flexibility, that you can have two of the following that would count as substantive interaction. It could be direct instruction. It could be feedback on students' coursework. It could be information or responding to a question about the content of a course or competency. It could be a group discussion regarding the content of a course. You may build in some synchronous time within your modules, within your competencies. Or it could be instructional activities approved by your institutions or programs accrediting agencies. So it could be, you need to have 2 of those in building your program. And I'll stop here just for a moment to see, Carlos, are there any questions that we should look at yet?
No questions yet. Just so you know, we have roughly 67% of folks that are in the scale-up stage, 25% developing their first program, and 8% that are just investigating. And then in category of what describes their role, we have 40% administrators, 33% faculty, and 27% that answered others. So that gives you an idea of who's here and where they are in their CBE journey.
Oh, super. That's great. You're in the sweet spot, it sounds like, in your programs, because all of these things are things to think about kind of ahead of time. So thank
Agreed.
you.
And Laurie, we actually had a question come in from Steve. Would an advisor or academic coach qualify as an instructor? Great question, Steve.
Yes, it's a great question. It probably depends on the roles and the responsibilities and what is the criteria, discipline, educational level, those type of things. That question needs to be addressed by your regional accreditor because regions are different. To my knowledge, if you're in HLC, they're a little more prescriptive, I think, than some of the others, or at least more than WASC, I could say. I'm more familiar with that. So I would reach out to your accreditor to ask that question.
And just as an example, Steve, for us, right, an academic coach would not qualify as an instructor, right? So for us, it needs to be the faculty of record that has the level of education, right, to be a faculty member for that course in SAS.
Carlos, that's also true for WASC. We have at Brandman, we do have academic coaches, but their staff, they're not faculty and would not count for faculty for us either.
Same here. Yep.
Yeah.
Great question, Steve. So keep them coming. Oh, from Emma. Laurie, are these updates only for direct assessment?
Yes, great question. These are for direct assessment. However, your regional accreditor may be adopting some of these pieces as part of your approval. So their regular and substantive interaction piece, and we're going to hit that next piece in just a second, is actually around distance education. So because most CBE programs are online distance education, it's embedded in that. So if you're running an online program, you're still going to have to adhere to substantive interaction, even if it's credit hour. So I would say that if you're doing a credit-based CBE program, but it's online, you're going to have to adhere to substantive interaction.
Excellent. Thanks, Laurie. Great questions, everyone. Keep them coming. But that's all we have for now, Laurie.
Okay, thank you. So regular interaction, and you usually hear that term, faculty initiated regular and substantive interaction. You hear substantive and regular interaction all together. But I kind of broke those into 2 pieces because when you're building your model, it's like now we know what substantive interaction is. Let's look at what does regular mean. So the Department of Ed looks at regular interaction between a student and an instructor or instructors. And a couple of pieces here. One, it has to be, that interaction has to be prior to completion of that course or competency. So it can't be at the very end, once they're done and you're giving feedback on a final assessment only. That's not it. It has to provide an opportunity for substantive interactions with a student on a predictable and regular basis. That aligns with both the length of the time and the amount of content. So you may have some competencies that are bigger, wider, so to speak. And so you're going to have more substantive interactions than one that might be really small. This is really to help differentiate competency-based education from correspondence courses where students are learning more on their own. So this is a big piece that you're building in your model. And every university that I'm aware of has a little bit different approach. But within that regular interaction, students' academic engagement has to be monitored and their success, and you have to ensure that the instructor is proactively engaging. And proactive is very important because you have to build in the model that the faculty is reaching out to the students and not that the faculty is just waiting until a student asks for help. So you're really building in that teaching, that pedagogical approach within your competency-based programs where the faculty member is engaged with the student. So these are two really, really important pieces in competency-based education. It's not students just learning on their own. Faculty are reaching out to them in a regular and substantive way. Within this regulation, flexibilities, things that have changed. So this is super exciting to me because we have these 4 programs and now we can also add these pieces. The new regulations permit preparatory coursework and also coursework required by a state for teacher certification. So previous, you could not have any prep coursework within your competency-based programs, and whether that's like standalone modules or embedded, but you can do that now as of July 1. In addition, programs offered can be in part credit clock hours and in part credit hour equivalencies. So you can have programs which are more, and I think SACS used the word hybrid within their accrediting agency, where you may have a student doing part competency-based program and part credit hour, and you have to carefully build that, of course, for financial aid. So that is a result of the Department of Ed doing some experimental sites that said this is a good thing. But we're all trying to figure out how to do that. There's that piece. So it's new. Third, it requires the institution to establish a methodology to equate each module to either credit hours or clock hours. And those who are seasoned in CBE understand what this means. It's basically competency. There's a crosswalk of competencies that are back to the credit hour. And it's really to protect students. So if students are coming into your CBE program, they may have some coursework that might count. And so you're like, oh, that's equivalent to English 103. That may meet this competency. And more importantly, if a student leaves in midstream, right, leaves your program, they have competencies, but they also need to have that crosswalk to credit hours because say they're going to a credit hour program. So very important that you have some type of methodology that this competency equals 3 credits, this one equals 2, this one equals 4. And again, your CBE friends and colleagues can, give you examples of how they came up with a reasonable methodology. Approval for distance education. This is one other change, is that the Department of Ed is really more heavily relying on your regional accreditor or your state approval agency, both regarding qualifications of instruction, which that was a question that we brought up, so that was a great question, and in determining the work associated with the institution's credit hours. Is this common for distance education program? Is this common for the credit hour? So they're really empowering, I think, my view, the regional accrediting agency more so in making those determinations. And then a big piece for those folks that have programs already that are direct assessment, is that the Department of Education requires approval of your first CBE program, your direct assessment CBE program at a degree level. So for example, if you're building your very first CBE program and it's associate's degree and you get approved and you want to build 5 more associate degree programs, you don't have to go to the Department of Ed for approval. You're just working with your regional accreditor. However, if your first one is associates and now you're like, I think I'll have a bachelor's program, then you do have to go to the department because that's at a different degree level. So for those that are, within the degree level, this is huge because you don't have to have every program go forward.
Laurie?
Yes, please.
We have a good question from Steve. So given the power today of LMS adaptive technologies, and he gives as examples, use of item response theory to customize learning pathways, what recommendations do you have with respect to ensuring instruction is regular and substantive?
Sure, great question. And Brandman uses within our learning management system for our CBE, Strut Learning, we have what we call like adaptive learning engine, which I think is, Steve, is kind of what you're talking about, I'm guessing. So that students, may go through a piece of learning and then take an assessment to test their knowledge, and they're like, yeah, they've got it. So then the system kind of doesn't push you backwards, pushes you forward to new content. That happens all within the competency. So the faculty role, you still need to have regular and substantive interaction. So what we are, what we do at Brandman University is we have what are called milestones. And our milestones within the competencies, every student must complete the milestones in the competency. So they are doing that technology enhanced kind of adaptive learning engine piece, but they still have to do the milestones where the faculty works with the student, gives them feedback within that. So that's just one idea of how we've integrated both adaptive learning with substantive interaction. And Carlos, I don't know if in your experience or you have other, models.
So we have the pre-test, post-test model, right? So they come in, they take a pre-test, and depending on their knowledge, skills, and competencies and abilities, the faculty will guide that learning through the competencies. But we also have artifacts embedded into the courses. That way, there's always something that the student needs to demonstrate and receive, feedback and have that interaction between the faculty and student.
Yes, okay. So yes, there's a lot of models, I think. And so that's where your CBE friends will come in handy through this.
One follow-up question from Steve, Laurie. To meet financial aid requirements, are the time limits placed on the milestones?
A student, for us, yes, a student cannot master that competency unless they have completed the milestones and the summative assessment. So that's what we told the Department of Ed and Financial Aid. So yes, that would be what students would have to do. They can't jump to the end and bypass that.
Perfect, thanks, Laurie.
Okay, sure, good questions. So regional accreditation process and expectations. So we've talked about federal government, but let's do a little bit deeper dive on regional accreditation. Which I always think that kind of sits underneath your Department of Ed. And so for the approval process has to be approved by your regional accreditor, and that goes through a substantive change process. I sit on WASC and probably the last 6 or 8 years have sat on the substantive change committee. So again, I've learned a great deal about kind of how this works. The regional accreditation model, the ones that I'm going to walk through a little bit today, I'll talk about the WASC Senior because I'm the most familiar with that, but also I have references because you're Texas-based, Carlos, and I'm assuming folks are, they're throughout the nation, but maybe more from Texas. We'll talk about SACs or maybe in the SACs region. The other piece of the approval process is once you start your first CBE program, that it also brings about a site visit from your regional accreditor 6 months post implementation, because it's really considered what we call a structural change for your institution. So for SACs, and just to do a little bit deeper dive on how they're organized in looking at this, is the first thing is please early communication with your regional accrediting agency, no matter who it is. If you're thinking about this as an institution, and it sounds like a lot of folks are in the beginning stages, please reach out to your regional accrediting agency, talk to them. This is what you're thinking. Access their information and their forms so that you can build the model according to what, various compliance issues. It's so much easier to do it as a new build than a retrofit. As if any of you've gone through that, you understand that. I told Carlos that, we can share this presentation. I'm happy to share the slides. There's a couple of places where there are hot link, and one of this is the SAC's direct assessment competency-based program policy statement. Has great information to help guide you. Another big consideration as you're building your program is your CBE program going to be direct assessment, or is it going to be more based on a credit hour program? So I think right now there's maybe 6 institutions that are direct assessment. So the majority of the programs are more the credit hour program, but that's a conversation and something you'll need to explain to your regional accreditor. WGU is more the credit hour program. That's how their financial aid is packaged. Brandman, we have direct assessment, and then a handful of others. So this is a careful conversation that you need to have, because you need to build your model according to which direction you're going. Another consideration in building your model is, will the program be all CBE or all CBE direct assessment, or are you going to do a hybrid where you might have CBE direct assessment for part, but then some of the courses are credit hour? And then how do you bundle that together for financial aid? What counts for full-time student status? And so I wish I could share models of that under this new regulation, but we're all just kind of learning this in real time. Another piece is to look at your accreditor schedule for submission. Almost all regional accreditors have regularly scheduled commission meetings, and then that has to be kind of backdated of when your substantive change committee meets and when it's reviewed. So you need to look at that timeline and kind of build that into when you want to implement all those approval processes. So let's just walk through a little bit of the regional accreditation process, kind of where you start. One of the first, which I'd say more formalized other than conversation, is a submission of a screening form to your regional accreditor. Many times that screening form is that first step that will elicit things like fees, due dates, data review, establishment of the team that will be reviewing your process. So that's kind of that first piece. The next is the big lift on you as institutions is completing the substantive change proposal. And we'll walk through SACs. They're very similar in my experience across the regions, the regional accreditors, but we'll look at some bits and pieces of what is in that proposal. So you're really putting all of this together. For SACs, they have a committee on compliance and reports that review your proposal. For WASC, they choose members from the substantive change committee that will review that proposal. So again, regionals may differ slightly. After it's reviewed, a recommendation is made regarding approval, and that goes to the commission, the regional accreditor commission. Once you have approval, then you go to the Department of Ed for direct assessment. and for your first CBE program at a degree level. So that's kind of the high notes before we get into details. And questions, Carlos? Or keep going?
No new questions yet, so you can keep going.
Okay, thank you. So here's the lift on you as institutions, but also the really fun part, because you get to build your programs. So within SACS, the substantive change proposal has many areas that you need to write to and show evidence of. One is institutional mission. This is really important because this is explaining why you're building your CBE program, how that fits within your institutional mission, and kind of tell that story, and and the commitment that you have at the institution for doing this. So that is one piece. A second big piece is a section on information to students. So they're looking at, how are you presenting this program to students? How are you describing competency-based education? How is that different than regular, just like online or on ground? Is the student well aware of expectations for the program? The number of competencies, what's needed to, to master a competency. So they're really looking at what you're sharing with students about the program. In addition, SACS, there's a section on structure and coherence of the program. So they're looking at, how is this structured? Is it a sequence program where students go from from competency to competency? Is it a 6-month subscription model? Is it a 3-month? Is it term, non-term? All of these decisions about your competency-based program. So really, what is that framework of it and the structure? The next section that you'll see in the proposal is student admissions and eligibility. So is this the same admissions that you have for all of your programs? Is there additional eligibility, like use of technology? Is there any type of pre-orientation or something that needs to happen before a student enters the CBE program? So you'll need to think about your admissions and eligibility. Assessment of programs and student learning. This is what I, of course, consider the heart of a CBE program. How are you going to assess student learning? How are you going to collect that information? What does that look like? Is each competency shows mastery? Or is it performance-based? Is it objective-based? Can students retake until they pass? So just thinking through how you want to structure your program and assessment. And who's assessing the student? Is the faculty teaching and assessing? Do you have an unbundled faculty model, which kind of bumps into the next category, which is faculty? What is your faculty model? I know Carlos, I think it was last week, CBE did CBEN did a huddle on faculty model. And I just looked at the data, and there are a lot of different faculty models for competency-based education. But what SACS is looking at is, what is your model for your institution for competency-based education, and what does that look like? And the last one here, that we have a few more on the next slide, is the institutional responsibility for awarding the credentials. So is it mastery of all competencies, a blend? So, addressing the question, how is that credential awarded? In addition, you thought you were done with your proposal, but not yet, because another piece that SACS is looking for, and I'll say WASC does the same, is application of academic policies. So at Brandman University, we have policies for undergraduate students and graduate students in our catalog, but we also have academic policies for competency-based education, where things may differ. One is grading, You may have, a policy different in regards to how many times you can take a final assessment. There may be differences in admission. And that's the place where you need to think about where are the policies the same or different, and for CBE students, what does that look like? The next, acceptance and awarding of credit or unit of competencies. So again, we know we have to do that crosswalk, which we talked about. A competency is equal to how many credits? Is this one equal to 3? Is this one equal to 1 to 2? And how you determine that. How did the faculty and institution determine that? Contractual agreements need to be included, whether that is something like Steve brought up, a contractual agreement with your LMS. You may have an assessment AMS too as part of your program. You may have student authentication, built in. So these are any agreements that you may have in building your program. The next is student services and access to resources. This may be where you would include your narrative about your coach, if they're really doing the advising, what does that look like? What does any online tutoring, student assistance throughout the program? So really the student's life cycle, how are all the career services, how is all of this addressed for your CBE student? I can tell you at Brandman, when we were building our first program, we had the academic team working on writing the competencies, the assessments, the educational journey. At the same time, we had a business team and student services looking at what is the coach's role and responsibility, what about admissions, financial aid services, all of those pieces. Right now, we do have academic coaches for our program who are primarily kind of the hub. They stay with the student throughout the program and they help contact them with various services. They also watch student engagement. So we have, dashboards that they watch. Are students in the competency? Do they need some help? Why haven't they been in for 2 weeks? So really that student engagement and pace, they work. They're amazing. And then the last piece is fees and compliance with Title IV funding in your proposal. So you can see it is deep and wide in regards to the information that you're thinking about in building this program. Okay. Best practices. So now I'm sure you're super excited about building your program and probably have a lot of questions, but hopefully some answers now. So best practices really are things that we've learned as an institution. You kind of learn a lot when you fall down, skin your knees, so to speak, and learn from your colleagues. So one thing I would strongly recommend is work with your regional accreditor early. Talk to them, see what compliance areas are sticky issues, what have other institutions, areas that are, super concerned. So talk to them very early. Have frequent communication with them so you have a clear understanding if you're direct assessment or non-direct assessment, if you're doing a hybrid program, looking at the credit hour modalities and or how you line up that crosswalk. So again, talk to your regional accreditors. Network, Carlos is really good at this. Network with your CBE institutions. In the beginning, when we were building, there were very few institutions that had competency-based education. So now we're so fortunate. I know it's way over 100 that are within CBEN, the Competency-Based Education Network, which is the national organization. But you'll have minute questions along the way, like how do you do grading? What does the grading look like? What does mastery mean? How does your faculty model work? So those are the, when you kind of get down in the weeds, you want to talk to folks that you know, have some experience and can kind of help as you make these decisions. And then do make sure you look at what are the compliance for regular substantive interaction. If your program is going to be online, and the majority are, even though you may have some on-ground component, you want to make sure that you have built in regular and substantive interaction, and you have a way to monitor. It's not okay just to say you're doing it, but what if someone says, how do I know you did it? Show me the evidence. You want to build that into your system that you can show compliance. Other best practices. This one's hard, and I think it brings about great conversation with faculty and leaders, is the credit hour equivalency methodology. You are empowered as an institution to determine that, but you want to make sure it's clear, easy to understand, and that you can defend, yes, this competency is worth 3 credits because it's, you know, similar to the learning outcomes in this 3 credit class, or whatever your story is and the amount of work that a student does, but you need to establish credit hour equivalency. Make sure you include those federal regulations if you're going forward to direct assessment in your program design. And as I said, better to build it in than have to do a retrofit after. And do consider seeking assistance from experts for sticky challenges. So as you may get to spots, you're like, oh man, I'm not sure what to do here. So you may want to bring in folks, you know, for particular areas in your development. So design for your competency-based, thinking about your regional accreditation approval, you do want to build it so you get approval. Make sure that you have clear overarching competency statements. And please know that underneath those competency statements, you're going to have goals or sub-goals, folks call them different things, that support that. But what is that overarching, what I call can-do competency statement? Align your CBE program to your institution's mission. So how does this CBE fit? Is this a new population that you're looking at, student base, or is it to meet some other need that is not fulfilled within your mission? Align your competencies with both either a discipline framework and or industry expectations. So again, depends on the program that you're looking at. For some, if you're looking at like nursing or social work, you have very strong discipline framework. There's certain things you have to do because the profession says so. Industry expectations might be, you know, there's a lot of data that just came out about what employers are saying about their folks that they're hiring is, you know, they need critical thinking, they need collaboration and networking, and so you may want to build those in. What is the industry expecting? Do build in student success for, you know, in the beginning, you know, how are students going to get help, both academic help, additional academic help, and help with engagement and reaching out to other student services, like library, great example. Build in program success metrics. So if you were asked, is your program successful? You want to think ahead. These are the metrics that I'm going to use to say success. Time to degree, lower costs. And I know, Carlos, you've been the lead on these, kind of helping other institutions, you know, look at this. And workforce success, how do you define retention? Look at your graduation rate, all of those pieces. You want to think ahead of time. Use defensible, authentic assessments. Remember, in a CBE program, a student doesn't progress unless they, you know, master their competency. And evidence of mastery is your assessment, usually your summative assessment. So you need to, as an institution, be able to defend that. Authentic means, what we try to do is, many CBE programs their final assessments or summative assessments are performance-based because it simulates or replicates what a student would be doing in the profession. For example, in our Bachelor of Business Administration program, students have to put together a business plan. It has 10 different parts, and they have to present it to a board, pretend board. And so that is something that you probably have to do on the job. So that's just an example. Do determine role of faculty, coaches, student support services. Will your faculty be similar to your credit hour faculty? Will they be different? Will your coaches be similar to your advisors and or different? And student support services, is it the same with additional responsibilities or different? So you'll have to write to that. Do build in dual transcript capabilities. Your regional accreditor and Department of Ed will ask this so that students, what that means is students will receive a transcript that is competency-based. It'll say, whatever the competency is and the student mastered, but they'll also have a transcript for credit hour, that crosswalk, because as I said, what if a student walks away from your program, changes their mind, it's not good, doesn't meet their learning needs. So, and they go into a credit hour program. So you want that the student doesn't lose anything, that they actually say, look, I have this many credits towards my degree. So, I have to always bring up the quality framework for CBE. This is from CBEN. There's rubrics. This will help build your program. If you're not familiar with this, you can find this online. But it really helps you think about, am I writing clear competencies? What do my assessments look like? Am I engaging employers? So this will help, not that everybody does everything at the 100%, but it will help guide your work in building the program. And then the last are just some resources that might be helpful. Of course, CBEN, can't say enough, please look at the organization. There's over 100 organizations, universities, colleges throughout the nation and international. It's good to have a lot of CBE friends as you're going through this. So I strongly encourage you to look at their website and think about joining. The Journal of Competency-Based Education has a ton of information that you can access, research-based, that provides institutions with guidance on various questions. I've had another great pleasure of being a co-author with Deb Bushway, who started the program at Capella, and Charla Long, who leads CBEN, in writing a leader's guide to CBE. And chapters are, on looking at the approval process, looking at assessments, how do you write competencies? So it may be a helpful tool for you. And of course, I'm super excited for May 6th that that under Carlos' leadership and Courtney's, that there is another webinar similar, looking at maximizing teaching load, pay scale, and course enrollment. So down in the weeds, but very necessary for us to think about faculty roles and responsibilities and how you get it done. So we have a few minutes. Happy to answer any questions or comments.
Laurie, thank you so much. That was a ton of value. And as you can imagine, we have a lot of questions coming in. So I want to make sure we have enough time to get a couple of these, okay?
Sure.
All right, so from Steve, what considerations do you make for students who want a more traditional program? How does that affect planning?
So could you say that again?
What considerations do you make for students who want a more traditional program? How does that affect planning?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think there's no one answer for all students in regards to the best modality. So if you're thinking that you're not sure you want to build all CBE if you're building a program and you have more traditional students, you may want to build a program that's hybrid, that has some traditional coursework, especially if there's certain areas that seem more challenging, and then others that students could do via competency. So you could actually kind of blend that together for your traditional students. There's also, there are some models that are emerging that for traditional students, it's still competency-based, but they may be going onto a campus into a learning lab. And so they're actually coming into the campus instead of online. They're in a learning lab, faculty are there, but students are still working at their own pace. So if you feel that your students want to be there in person, there are ways and models that you can do CBE in that way too.
Yeah, and just to add on to Laurie's points, Steve, I mean, CBE is not for everyone, right? So you will have, like Laurie said, so you will have some students that are a better fit for a traditional setting. So we actually have both pathways. We have a traditional BAAS program and then our CBE program. And so usually it is during our CBE orientation where we capture students that might be a better fit for a more traditional setting and we move them into that direction. Okay, Laurie, what from Dr. Smiley, Elias Smiley, hello, Dr. Smiley. Laurie, would you please share your insight about direct assessment and financial aid issues?
Okay. So it's not easy, I'll say that. And our business office, we had to work really closely with financial aid to think about disbursements, to think about satisfactory academic progress. But we have it up and running, and I think it's a really good system. So it's all doable. I think considerations is when you're looking at direct assessment financial aid is, do you want a subscription model? Do you want a subscription model? And what I mean by that is a student takes, their load of competencies. It's, say, for example, we're on a 6-month at Brandman. If a student finishes their competencies 3 months, they can take the next bundle of competencies and move forward without additional cost. So for us, our CBE program is about the third of the cost of our credit hour program, and students can go through quicker. So it's all doable, but there's some additional pieces that you'll have to build in. And I would talk to, I can tell you, Dave Musser's amazing, but talk to other direct assessment institutions as you think through that.
Excellent, thank you, Laurie. Next question, how do you, so last two, because we're running out of time, how do you balance self-pacing in CBE so that you don't spill or fall into correspondence education instead of distance education?
Yes, so for us, our students are self-paced, but we have the milestones. And if we find that a student is, say, not engaged in a competency, and I'm sorry, I'm not a financial aid person, so somebody else on here, but there's a certain amount of time, I don't know if it's 2 or 3 weeks, if you're not engaged in some way, you may actually be dropped from the program as per financial aid rules. So that's why our coaches reach out to students frequently, and they do kind of set what I call a safety net of, asking the students, what is your goal? When do you want to have things done? We want to personalize so that the coach can then help the student with a pace so that students just don't kind of drop out.
I agree. Thanks, Laurie. Last question. Can you please describe your faculty model and possibly other models out there for CBE programs?
Sure. So at Brandman, currently, our CBE program is taught all by full-time faculty. They are a different model than our credit hour full-time faculty. Our credit hour full-time faculty carry probably a certain load of classes in addition to committee work and, a scholarship, those other pieces. Our tutorial faculty, which are full-time faculty, they're discipline specific for competencies, but their primary role is teaching. So the modules are built. They're going in and working with the students. So if I am a tutorial faculty and my discipline is English, certain number of competencies will be assigned to me, and I'm constantly going into those competencies, grading the formative assessments, the milestones, working with students throughout that. They're also, they have 2 breaks. Our tutorial faculty have break in the winter and a break in the summer, but other than that, they're kind of running year round. So their schedule's a little bit different. Other models, your credit hour faculty may be assigned to credit hour classes and competencies, and loads are counted accordingly. So you may just have one type of faculty, but they live in both worlds.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Laurie. And Hilaire, hopefully I'm saying that right. We will be discussing A&M Commerce faculty model on May 6th. So hopefully you can join us. Laurie, so we're running short on time. I'm gonna end with what Steve is saying here. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise. It is very much appreciated. So thank you, Laurie, and thank you for all to our attendees. And someone asked here if the session was being recorded. Yes, it will be recorded, and we will send it along. And like Laurie mentioned, if you do want the presentation, just reach out to us, and we're more than glad to share it. So Laurie, thank you once again. Wonderful presentation.
Okay, thank you so much for the invitation, Carlos. And thank you, audience.
Thank you, everyone.